Okay, let's take a look at the parts we're no longer using since installing the carburetor, Hitchcock's carburetor kit. Obviously the screwdriver and Sharpie pen did not come out of the fuel injection system. But from right to left here, we have the fuel pump, which I'll disassemble and show you what's inside and how to change the filter here shortly. Here's the O-ring. This O-ring sits in this. It's a spacer, but it also could be it's a hard plastic block. It could be a heat, like a thermal barrier from the throttle or from the fuel injector housing, from the head, because the head would be on this end. So you would have the O-ring in here. This would bolt to the head. This would bolt, obviously the same bolts go through all of this. And this is your fuel injector housing. This is your fuel line that comes from your fuel pump. You would have an electrical connection right here from the ECU to trigger the fuel injector to squirt the fuel in right there. I don't know if you see that. Yeah, it's right there. That's all there is to that part. This is the boot for the throttle body clamp, and then the throttle body. This is what one looks like when it's not on the bike. Anyway, there's your TPS. You can see it's hooked right to the butterfly. Shaft goes through into the TPS. And when you loosen this bolt and rock this back and forth, it obviously changes the timing of how it's related to the position of the butterfly. So I think the ECU will use this for timing and for fuel injection purposes, to meter fuel or to adjust the amount of fuel that would need to be injected into the engine at any given throttle setting. Up top here, it's missing, but the map went right here, MAP, manifold absolute pressure, and it's set down in here with an O-ring and this clamped onto the top. It would also have an electrical connection, and it's basically going to measure via that hole right there, the pressure in the manifold. So it's going to use that to determine how much air is flowing through your throttle body. Coming back here, this is your cold start plunger. And really all it does, and this is it right here, the cable comes through the spring into the plunger. You rotate the thing on the handlebar, it pulls the plunger up and causes an air leak down there and lets more air in, probably right there, maybe through, oh, it's back there, you can see it. It's a smaller hole back by the throttle, or by the butterfly, sorry. So yeah, you're causing an air leak when you rotate that lever on the left handlebar. Moving this way, here is the the idle speed adjustment, which you have to do really slowly so that the bike can correct for, basically, again, you're creating an air leak. And the bike's adapting to that air leak, and that's how you're changing the RPM at idle. That hole right there is where your air leak would start from, right there. I'm assuming the source of the air is somewhere on this side. Don't know. This line here is the vacuum line that runs down to your evap system to trigger it, to turn it on or off. It's how it tells if the engine's running or not running, basically. This would be the line that you need to plug if you're going to remove your evap system. So you'd find the line that's coming off of here. You could probably cut it, plug it, or you could get a cap and put on here. This is really buried up underneath the frame though, so it's kind of hard to get to. I would imagine most people just find the line, cut it right about here, plug that line, zip tie, whatever, and then the vent hose from the bottom of the tank, and it's the one on the right-hand side that has a clamp on it. That's your actual vent. You would release that from the evap system and just let it hang down below the motor. And this is if you're going to delete your evap system. The second vent line on the left-hand side as you're sitting on the motorcycle basically drains excess fuel from the top of the fuel filler cap. And that one already vents down below the bike. It just hangs down below. So like if you've ever fueled up your bike and you've put too much fuel in, you'll notice fuel running out the bottom and it's coming from that area. Anyway, I don't know if there's much more to talk about on that throttle body. Let's set it aside. And finally, we have the boot that goes from the throttle body. Sorry, this is backwards, it goes this way. We have the boot that goes from the throttle body to the airbox. This is actually glued to the airbox. I don't know that it needs to be glued to the airbox. There's some kind of a weird rubbery sealant they use to hold this in. You can see it actually has a bell shape to it for airflow. I know it, I guess the sealant didn't look that bad, but it seemed like a kind of a weird thing to put. And there was some on the inside too. So, I mean, you could ingest the sealant if it ever came loose. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. I don't know about that technique. Maybe they had issues with that boot falling off. I know there's been some people reported that this boot wasn't even connected, like their throttle body is just all wonky in here and off to the side. You know, so ingesting all kinds of goodies, especially if they were off-road, because that's completely bypassing the air filter. This guy here is your throttle cable. The carburetor kit comes with its own throttle cable, so here it sits on the bench, which will go in the box with all the other parts. And I think that's about it. If you have any questions, please post in the comments below. And if you like what you see, just click on subscribe. Maybe give a thumbs up. Anyway, you guys ride safe. Be careful. Good morning. I wanted to pop the fuel pump apart since I have it out. No longer using it with the Hitchcock's carburetor kit. But we can disassemble it here and I can show you what's inside. And if you decide that this is something you want to do, this is where you would actually change your fuel filter. It's inside this housing. This housing is up inside the fuel tank. And when you're looking at it from the right side, it'll look like this on the bottom. This port going back to your fuel line. There's a throttle body. We'll talk about that in a bit. If you're going to disassemble this, take pictures so you put it back together correctly. I always do that. First thing you do when you get it out is to pull these wires out. Make sure you get them back in the right order. Then you're going to depress the 4 pins, of which I've already done. That's why there's a big gap right here. These 4 pins, and you're going to pull this top off. And let's see if we can get the top out. Oh, well, I guess we should probably unhook the wires from the holder. Sorry, one-handed action here. Top's off. Fuel pump and filter slides out. Filter slides off the bottom. And you just kind of wiggle it around to get it out of that holder there. And that'd be your fuel filter. When you put this back together, make sure all your O-rings are where there should be. I don't think there's any O-rings in the bottom, but there's an O-ring in the top of the pump, which goes in this port where your fuel pressure regulator is. And there's an O-ring here, which captures this port. So you'd assemble in the reverse of that. New fuel filter on, slide it in the bottom, make sure the O-rings are in place, pop the top back on, redo the wires, and assemble it back into the fuel tank. I just popped mine apart. My bike only has maybe 1,900 miles on it, and there's a lot of crap inside here. So don't know if it's from my fuel station where I buy gas, or if it was in there during production or first, I don't know, whatever. So you've got a funky running fuel pump, maybe take it apart and check your fuel filter. Make sure there was, well, you can see down in here, there's particles down there. Those shouldn't be there, all those little black spots. Obviously nothing in the top, I don't think. Let's look, no. Because things would tend to settle, I believe. Oh, there's something down there by the fuel pressure regulator. Look at that. So yeah, there's little particles inside the fuel pump on a bike that only has 1,800 miles on it. You know, is it assembly process of the tank at the factory, or is it just gas from my service station with crap in it? Don't know. But I guess it's a good reason to take it apart and replace the fuel filter. This is a fuel filter from eBay, or fuel pump from eBay, which is very similar. You could probably make this work. It's a little bit longer. But if you search eBay, you can probably find a replacement pump itself instead of buying this whole assembly. Because really, when the pump goes bad, that's the part that goes bad. Also, people saying that you should replace your relays with 30 amp relays. Well, I mean, look at these tiny wires. Really? You really think 30 amps it's going to make a difference here? Those wires can't support 30 amps anyway. So here's all the junk. I don't think that metallic piece was in there, but these items were in there. And then as we saw earlier, there's something down by the fuel pressure regulator. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know that 30 amp relay is going to make much of a difference. Those wires probably aren't supporting 30 amps. In fact, I know they're not. But anyway, that's the fuel pump. Put it back together in the reverse order. Of course, you want to clean it up. And maybe since you have it apart, put a new filter on. And I'm going to do that right now and put it back in the box.